filtering versus matching, frame monopoly, and how online hiring unintentionally placed Jenga with the foundations of the global economy. Why the talent industry blames the unpaid labor force it depends on for the market failure it creates. Hi, my name is Sarah Trumbull. I'm the founder and CEO of the Job Applicant Perspective, for synonymous user reviews for job ads across the U.S. Think of ourselves like Yelp in the world of professionally mandated fine dining with no health department, no FDA. This is the level of go-to-market awareness as well as public service for all the gaslighting. This video blog comes from my Substack, which comes in written format. I also have this in little clips on YouTube or on my other socials too. And I do this long form video blog. It's kind of meet people where they're at and have this in audio format too, because, paradigm shifts and all that. So a bit of a long one. So I'm going to start pretty straightforwardly. Acknowledging the title. I'm aware the title sounds hyperbolic. It is not. What follows is a structural diagnosis that requires only a filtering system and a matching system to be two different things, revenue models to shape behavior, and a missing feedback loop to collapse a market's ability to notice misaligned financial incentives. I love first principles. It's my jam. When hiring moved online, it was built to match how employers, economists, and the public understood the market, not how the market actually functioned. Newspapers matched, job boards plus ATS filter. It's different. This isn't about blame. It's about what happens when you build an economy's foundational market using only one frame of reference. This is for job seekers navigating ATS-heavy application processes, employers and HR professionals wondering why qualified candidates disappear, policymakers, labor researchers, and economists studying structural inefficiencies in the U.S. labor markets, investors and industry observers analyzing ATS market dynamics. If you've ever suspected the hiring system is broken but could not name why, this is the naming. So starting from the term frame monopoly, I think this is my own term, but I'm definitely pulling from existing sociological concepts. Just talking about reference frame monopoly here. A frame monopoly, as I coin it, I think it's me. I don't know. A frame monopoly, as I'm describing it here, is when one perspective becomes so dominant, it stops feeling like a perspective at all. It becomes reality, the default, the way things are. The other perspectives don't get argued against. They don't get dismissed. They simply aren't in the room at all. Examples outside of the hiring market. Car safety in the 1950s and 60s. For decades, car safety meant driver behavior, don't speed, pay attention, drive defensively. Then Ralph Nader asked a different question. What if cars are killing people? Steering columns impaled drivers on impact. Dashboards were hard metal. Doors flew open in car crashes. No one saw it because the frame was safety equals driver responsibility. The question of vehicle design wasn't being asked. Medical research in the 20th century. It's very amusing to me. For most of modern medicine, the default human body was male. Drug trials used men. Dosing was calibrated to men. Symptom profiles were based on men. When women presented differently, heart attacks without chest pain, different drug metabolisms, they were called atypical. That's funny. I'm pretty sure population percentages-wise, men are atypical. Women are actually more typical humans. But again, it's not about being typical or not. It's about, this is silly. The male body wasn't argued to be the standard. It just was the standard. The female body was a deviation from the baseline. Even scientifically, the way people are born, that's not how that works genetics-wise. It took decades for researchers to ask, what if bodies differ in ways that matter? Yeah. I remember I was reading Danielle Messnick-Young's book, Uncultured, and she was talking about being overseas in Afghanistan or Iraq. I forgot which one it was. But she was putting on the bulletproof vests, and they realized that the Army hadn't designed bulletproof vests for female body types. So it didn't fit very well on them. It was very awkward. And I think, again, this is an example of free monopoly. I think that also even simple left-handed desks, as a left-handed person, I've always sat at right-handed desks too, but right-handed people shocked to have to sit at a left-handed desk. I think they just get, when you're, for whatever reason, the dominant subculture in a society, you forget that other people aren't moving from your reference frame all the time. I think another way to talk about kingdom culture, hierarchy, vertical morality, I think hegemony. I don't know. I make it my own terms a little bit, but I'm pretty sure I'm drawing from established stuff. Urban planning. Cities were designed around cars, roads, highways, parking minimums, suburban sprawl. The question was, how do we move cars more efficiently? The missing question was, how do we move people more efficiently? Pedestrians, cyclists, public transit users, they weren't argued against. They were designed out. The frame was transportation equals cars. Everything else was an afterthought. There was a great sort of Adam Explains Everything. Talk about this some, but also when I was in college, if you're interested. There's a book called I took a class called History of Suburbia, which I thought might be a little dull, but it was not at all dull. There's a book called Crabgrass Frontier, which is entirely fascinating. Anyway, the pattern. In each case, one perspective, a dominant perspective for whatever historical reason, is the default that gets optimized for. The missing perspective isn't rejected, it's invisible. The default feels like reality, not a choice. I think systems theory-wise, the difference here, you're looking at emic versus etic kind of thing. The concept that there is a default perspective, which for me, I don't really think there is. I think we all come at the world we all operate our own little Nintendo controllers, right? And I might have a sticky A button and you might have a sticky toggle switch. It just depends on the person. Anyway, started with a cultural norm. Don't talk about your hiring process. It makes you look unprofessional. So you had, one of these, and then you start putting it down. And that norm did more damage than any opaque algorithm. Here's the sequence as far as I see it. Don't talk about your hiring process, a social professional norm. Meant to be professional, you don't think about your hiring process, an internalized norm. Then professionalism becomes only seeing the hiring from the employer's point of view. Because you're a good professional, you don't talk about it, you don't think about it so that you don't talk about it. And then before you know it, you still have to think about hiring. So in order to stay safe, you only think about hiring from over here. It's kind of another way to say the category error I was speaking of in my previous blog posts. Professionalism becomes seeing hiring only from the employer's point of view. The job seeker perspective becomes structurally unthinkable. Job applicant perspective, right? The norm creates the silence creates the absence becomes invisible. You don't even notice that you're not noticing it. And this is, by the way, antithetical to functioning two-sided markets. But for decades, it didn't collapse the labor market. Newspapers held it together. Not because newspaper editors didn't hold the same professional norm, but because the business model required accuracy. A newspaper that ran fake job ads lost readers, A newspaper known for wasting people's time lost subscribers. Geographic proximity meant word of mouth accountability. The newspaper had a financial incentive to treat the labor market as having two stakeholders, even if the culture didn't. They didn't offer free job postings or software as a subscription job listings for employers because clean signal was their business model for readers or customers. The cultural norm said, don't think about job seekers. The newspaper's business model said, we have to. The tension held. Then hiring moved online. Employers and talent vendors didn't see job seekers as one half of a two-sided market, which is normal economics. They saw them as a group of actors to be managed, filtered, and controlled. For me, everybody engages with the world differently, so I'm going to give a vibe. I can't say if it's for everybody. My mental model was more along the lines of 1950s parent-child vibe. You're seen and not heard. You don't have needs. I tell your needs. You don't have wants. I tell your wants. Kind of vibe. That's the way that employers approach the labor force in a way, narratively. Again, everybody moves differently. This is a complex set of couple billion actors. So I'm not saying everybody thinks this way. I'm just saying overall vibe. So the talent industry built filters. Economists, journalists, and academics, all the institutions that should have noticed that by and of itself, a filter is not a matching market anymore. They carried the same professional norm the newspaper editors carried. But they did not carry the immediate financial incentive and requirement to require the market to behave anyway. There was no business model forcing them to treat the market as two-sided, regardless of the cultural professionalism that had created the market blindness. So they didn't. And in fact, to my mind, the professional expertise that led them to be the people in charge of the market, able to create the new version of the labor market, was the blind spot itself. They modeled a matching market while watching a filtering industry describe itself as filtering left, right, and center and grow and thrive. Yeah, narratives are fascinating, how they can just right in front of your eyes. It's actually really fascinating. It's insight for my own self about the things that I don't think that I don't see. So, for the first time in modern labor market history, there was no counterweight to this cultural norm. The frame monopoly, as I see it, was complete. Filtering versus matching. Here's the problem for the structural opposition. Here's the structural point that cannot be avoided. ATS systems require the presence of job seekers to justify their filtering mechanism. They profit to the tune of billions from the unpaid time and labor of those job seekers, and they succeed when those job seekers remain in the pool, available again to be filtered. This is structurally opposed to a healthy labor market, not because anyone intended harm, but because that's what filtering is. A matching system and the people it serves have aligned interests. Success means the same thing for both. You get hired, they get paid, the market clears. A filtering system and the people it filters have opposed interests. The system profits from their presence. Their goal is to leave the system. The opposition is baked into the mechanism itself. It doesn't require villainy. It just requires us to notice what we built. What employers think they're buying: protection, efficiency, a way to manage the flood. Too many applicants, too much noise, too much risk. The ATS is the bouncer at the door, the bodyguard, making sure only the right people get through. What they're actually buying: identity. The ATS doesn't just filter applicants, it tells employers who they are. The kind of company important enough to require filtering, sophisticated enough to need protection, important enough, desirable enough to attract the crowd. They're pop stars now because they need bodyguards. The bouncer isn't selling access. The bouncer is selling the feeling of being worth protecting. And here's what employers don't see. The bouncer needs the crowd. An ATS vendor doesn't profit when hiring is efficient. They profit when the filtering looks necessary, when the volume stays high, when employers keep believing they need protection from the masses. The crowd being filtered is the proof of value the vendor sells back to the employer. So the incentive is never to shrink the crowd, never to make the filtering unnecessary, never to match so well that the bouncer becomes obsolete. The incentive is to keep the crowd large, keep the filtering visible, and keep employers feeling special enough to pay for it. The structural result: job seekers provide the unpaid labor that justifies the filtering mechanism. Employers pay for identity validation disguised as efficiency. ATS vendors profit from both as long as the pool stays full. A matching market would shrink when it worked. This market, a filtering market, grows when it doesn't work. Harvard's Hidden Workers study documents what this looks like at scale. 27 plus million Americans actively seeking work filtered out by automated systems, qualified candidates excluded by keyword mismatches, credentialed screens, and rigid algorithmic requirements for years. Years. And that was in 2021. They were estimating it to grow every time, and that it was only 27 million in the US, and it was many times that across the world. The researchers framed this issue as employer loss, untapped talent, missed opportunity, competitive disadvantage. They weren't wrong, but notice what the framing reveals. By the way, this is why I always use Ivy League data. It's not that they're bad at getting data, it's they're not seeing what they're looking at. They weren't wrong, but notice what the framing reveals. Even when the filtering is documented, the job seeker still isn't the subject. The financial, social, and civic harm to them is in the headline. 27 million Americans and their friends and dependents, their communities, the social system, financial system that impacted wasn't even noted in that way. Like, it wasn't the headline. The cost, the inconvenience to employers was. Like, we're watching. That's frame monopoly still operating even in the research designed to expose the problem. The data proves the mechanism. The framing proves the blindness. We actually actively have information of companies profiting for years on the extended long-term unemployment of the U.S. population, as in that's their actual goal. 27 million Americans, 16% of the workforce, and they didn't even notice it because of this frame monopoly, to my mind. Selection bias, filtering for desperation. So even if you take that out of the equation, the structural opposition doesn't just extract from the labor force the U.S. citizenry. It degrades the quality of the talent pool over time. I'd like to thank one of my readers, Neurofoundry, for putting me onto this insight. He was fleshing out what he had suggested, or she, I'm not sure. ATS systems reward persistence. The more applications you submit, the more likely you are to eventually pass a filter. But persistence in the face of repeated rejection is not a signal of quality. It's a signal of desperation or of having no other options. Top talent with networks apply to a few places, get responses through referrals, direct contact, and when they hit a black hole in ATS, opacity, ghosting, algorithmic rejection, they move on. Top talent without networks gets creative. Perhaps they establish their own startup to analyze the market itself and discover that they have a real flair for labor market economics. Could be, just saying. But who submits 3,000 applications, still's getting ghosted and rejected and keeps going? People with no other path. People who have been unemployed long enough that they'll try anything. It's not even helping, even if they were top talent before, it's not helping them to be better talent either. So the ATS filter doesn't select for the best candidates. They're not necessarily the worst, but they're not the best either. It selects for candidates with fewest alternatives, the best remaining in the talent pool, that its existence will scare away anyone with options or actively degrade the quality of the people that stay in it. And it gets worse over time. Game theorists might call this a non-converging Nash equilibrium, a system where every rational actor's choices make the whole system worse and no one can unilaterally stop it. The pool degrades. Employers see a degraded pool and invest more in filtering. The cycle accelerates. This is adverse selection plus survivorship bias. The people who survive the ATS gauntlet aren't the best per se. They're the ones who had nothing else. Employers mistake their presence for evidence the system is working. We still get applicants is not the same as we're getting the best applicants. The filtering system, by its nature, assures that you're not. Yeah? The Jenga problem. Downstream economic effects. The labor market is not just a market. It is the foundation of all other markets. Consumer spending depends on wages. Tax revenue depends on employment. Economic mobility depends on people being able to find work that matches their capabilities. Roads, schools, firefighters, civic stability, all of it rests on a functioning labor market. When the labor market malfunctions, the effects do not stay contained. Wage suppression, a filtering system that keeps pool full, creates permanent downward pressure on wages. It will always do that. Employers don't actually need to hire from the talent pool. They just need workers to believe that they could be replaced. Talent pools, these databases of every resume ever uploaded, function as silent leverage. The employed feel the pressure even when actual labor demand is stable. Reduced consumer spending, suppressed wages mean less money circulating. Less money circulating means slower economic growth. The filtering industry's extraction does not just hurt job seekers, it ripples through every business that depends on consumers having money to spend, especially small businesses who can't find workers because they've been so impacted by this market. Decreased tax revenue. Unemployed and underemployed workers pay less in taxes. The economic drag created by a dysfunctional hiring market shows up in public budgets, fewer resources for infrastructure, education, and social services, stalled mobility. When qualified candidates can't signal themselves through opaque systems, they get stuck. Harvard's Hidden Workers Study estimated 27 million Americans are actively seeking work, but filtered out by automated systems. That's not a skills gap. That's a signal gap created by infrastructure that profits from the gap persisting. Each of these is a Jenga block. The filtering industry has been pulling blocks from the base of the global economy for 25 years. It calls itself a hiring solution. The frame monopoly hides the contradiction from the people who would normally stop it. When it comes to the job market issues, ghost jobs waste time, scams steal money, evergreen rules create false hope. There are problems still, I don't disagree, but the filtering industry is entirely different. It doesn't just profit from job seeker unemployment, it requires job seekers to participate in a process that's designed to keep them from the employment they came to find while extracting billions from their unpaid time and energy. That's not dysfunction. That's the professional, openly marketed market function. The marketing advertises the filtering mechanism. The economic harm scales to the entire workforce and to every system that depends on the workforce functioning. Frame monopoly in action when strategic becomes self-sabotage. The frame monopoly doesn't just affect how we build the infrastructure, it affects how employers behave within it. Evergreen rules, postings kept open indefinitely, whether a vacancy exists or not, feel like smart planning. We're building a pipeline. We're staying ready. Talent pools, databases of every resume ever uploaded, searchable as hypothetical replacements, feel like leverage. We have options. We're protected. Free job postings and SaaS subscriptions feel like efficiency. We're scaling our reach. In a functioning two-sided market, none of these would exist. There is a reason newspapers whose revenue depended on clean signal did not allow them. The existence of those in general should be very clear that job platforms have never once been neutral platforms. The existence of the ATS industry demonstrates the other side of that. But this part right here already, the job platforms are not even remotely neutral. They're wildly extractive. The frame monopoly made these behaviors feel rational. They are not. They're employers optimizing for a cultural sense of control while degrading the economic asset they depend on for their survival. And when the degradation shows up, worse candidates, longer time to fill, failed hires, the frame has no explanation except the one it's always had. Nobody wants to work anymore. So they double down. More filtering, more evergreen roles, bigger talent pools. The cycle accelerates, the market degrades further, and the workforce, the unpaid labor force that powers the entire system's $600 billion a year globally, it's wild to me, gets blamed for the failure that these choices create. This is how frame monopoly perpetuates itself. It prevents employers from seeing that their solutions are the cause. They can't update because updating would require stepping outside of a frame that feels like reality. This is the subtitle made structural. How online hiring blames the unpaid labor force it depends on for the market failure it creates. The frame monopoly isn't just a blind spot, it's a trap. And the only way out is to see it. You can check the research. This analysis builds on established economic theory and empirical research. I reference Akerlof, Fuller and Rahman, Hidden Workers, Untapped Talent, Rashay Roll, Platform Competition in Two-Sided Markets, and Resnick and Zackhauser, Trust Among Strangers in the Internet Transactions. I'd like to call out Hidden Workers. I called out my demographic. Yeah, caregivers of disabled people and disabled people. And we're great. We're smart as crap. You'd be lucky to have us. For academic versions of my own analysis, you can check out OSF, Zanito, or SSRN and put white papers there. What the job applicant perspective is doing. The filtering industry will not fix this. Their business model depends on it continuing. The employers won't fix this, not yet. The frame monopoly tells them the system is working and the workforce is a problem. It's these workers. I think the frame monopoly almost has like diabetic neuropathy. You walk on your wounded ankle, but you can't stop to realize that it's wounded. So you just get mad at the ankle. Why aren't you working, ankle? You just don't want to work anymore. Yeah, that's not it. Employers won't fix this, not yet. The frame monopoly tells them the system is working and the workforce is the problem. That leaves workers. The job applicant perspective is building the feedback layer that has been missing since hiring went online. Not revenge, not rage posting, signal. Signal. Job seekers documenting their experiences, warning each other where the worst of the dragons are. Slay each dragon at a time. Yeah? Mapping which companies ghost, which postings are evergreen theater, which ATS systems are black holes. This is harm reduction now, helping people navigate a broken system while the system still exists. But it's also the foundation for what comes next. As job seekers build collective knowledge, they become a constituency, not atomized individuals shouting into the void, a visible, data-generating, pattern documenting force. This creates pressure. Employers see which systems cost them qualified candidates. Journalists have data to cite. Academics have a new frame to work with. And legislators have a constituency asking for action. You cannot legislate what you can't see. You cannot organize around a harm no one has named. The first step is visibility. The rest follows. But that requires job seekers to have agency. And agency starts with information. I like spirals, systems. The inner and the outer, reflections of each other. It starts with information. That's what we're building. But moving against the institutional frame that's so totally ingrained is a task. And any level of buy-in from elite readers who recognize the scale and scope of the danger here and the necessity of the shift is always welcome. Always. At this point, that's where you start. Every step better is a little step better. 1% better is 100% better than it was. 2% better is 200% better. Step by step by step by step. We cannot know what we didn't know when we didn't know it. But the question is, what do we do when we do? This can be self-reinforcing loops because people want things to get better. Closing. Ending the frame monopoly isn't just about helping job seekers. It's about showing employers that the tools they bought to protect themselves are poisoning the economic market they depend on. Evergreen rules do not build optionality. They create a market of lemons. Akerloft's market. Yeah. Talent pools do not create leverage. They signal bad faith. I do not know how to say exploited labor in general, unions. I don't know how to say that any more clearly to you. If you're for the workforce and you're for your people's wages and you're for union dues and you're for membership, you need to be against talent pools. They can't be for you. They're not for you. You need to be against ghost jobs. ATS systems do not filter for quality. They filter out everyone who didn't guess the passwords. It's just open sesame, but the sesame keeps changing. I want to thank Sandvik versus Barr, Christian Sandvik, Harry Harholios, Krista Wilson. There's one more actor in this game. Anyway, they started me on this, and I came at this linguistically. But as I got more into economics, I realized I do economics, but it's more like systems translated through math and sociology. So I started looking at it from a systems angle, and then I was like, I don't think that's right. I don't think filtering and matching are the same thing. I don't think that should be. I don't even need to worry about the linguistics of it. But linguistically, there's a problem there too. So many problems. People not thinking clearly about this at all. But yeah, anyway, ATS systems do not filter for quality, not even remotely. They filter out everyone who didn't guess the password. That frame monopoly convinced employers this was working. Reality says otherwise. The data, they're destroying the economy. They're paying for creating their own Great Depression. They're purchasing it on purpose because of the frame monopoly. And every next person who can help us spread this message and change the narrative helps stabilize the situation. Step one, you can't offer much at first, but you can offer clarity, center. And that's the start. You can build from the center. You can build from the heart ground when you're not totally destabilized. And the civic society and everyone that relies on it benefits the more we can spread this message. So that's the cell. That's the concept. That's the ideas. I actually think I'm standing on really solid ground there. Yeah. But I don't know. I like systems, and I find uh this online labor market is almost like a velociraptor to me. I feel like Muldoon. I don't know if it'll get me in the end. Like, I don't know if my business will work, but it's almost beautiful in a terrible way. I don't know how to explain. It really is, but I'm trying to rein it in, trying to pull it back to the center, be almost like a lighthouse. I cannot stop the storm right now, but I can remind everybody where the center of the axis is again. Like everybody's like, I think complex systems are really interesting because if you ever seen those pictures where you have like a graph and you make one line and then you make another line and you make another line, they make another line, they make another line, make another line, and you think each time you're only making a small change, a small change, a small change. Before you know it, you've made an actual like curve. You're like way down here. I think that's what happened. But either way, this is the center. First principles are still the ground. And I want to help ground it. It's a place to start and a place to build. You can build from solid ground, you know? It's a place to go. But also, start by the job applicant perspective. There's anonymous crowdsourced hiring reputation system. This is the way. And if you're interested to how I see it building out long term, check out my SSRN, A Job Market for Lemons. Especially in section 7 of it, I go through the interlocking trust layers that I have planned out as it develops. I keep my plans careful, more like, I don't know, I guard my uncertainty because I really think you have to, uncertainty, doubt is where imagination comes from. It helps you be adaptable. So I lay out the structure of what I would do, but yeah, with investment, can be good. Anyway, START is the easiest branch to grab onto at first, though, is user reviews for job ads across the U.S. I see it as Yelp morphing into Google Maps of the hiring process. Because, again, sometimes, like, the roads are red, they're blocked, maybe ghosted a lot, not because anybody's a villain, because they have enough resumes. And being able for job seekers to tell each other that helps employers too, you know? Anyway, stop by, have a good one, and stay safe out there. Please be kind. We don't have to have money. We can still have each other, we can have each other's back. It's not required to have money to be kind. It's pretty great.